know that one thing that happened when I was a clinician was that just being like a natural builder, I've always wanted to like make things either with my hands or with software. I didn't feel like I had that outlet in clinical work. Could always create new tools for rehab, I suppose, which is great. It's not what seemed to speak to me. I couldn't find that outlet. And so I think that's when I finally said, you know what? I have this idea. I need to figure out how to make it. That feeling of like not having that outlet is what got me started and really needing to like be able to make these things. And I just don't have that in my clinical work.
Hey there, and thanks for listening to the Beyond These Clinic Walls podcast. I'm your host, Julia, a PT turned product professional, joined by my delightful partner in crime co-hosts, Emma.
This is my tribe. This is how I think.
And Emily.
That is the best getting into PT story I've ever heard.
Founders of the Clinician Transition. Each episode, we interview former rehab professionals who have leveraged their clinical skills into non-traditional roles. I invite you to come hear the journeys, follow the career paths, and learn about the opportunities beyond these clinic walls. On today's episode of Beyond These Clinic Walls, we're joined by Damian Jankowski, Dr. J. Dr. J embarked on an extraordinary journey from devoted doctor of physical therapy to a passionate software engineer and web developer. With a decade of dedicated patient care under his belt, Damian's transition was accompanied by his acquisition of an MBA, signaling his commitment to personal growth and the pursuit of knowledge while building his technical skills through self-teaching and the creation of innovative software solutions. His path unfolded through captivating chapters in web development, spanning industries from physical therapy to tabletop gaming and academia. Damian's zeal for crafting exhilarating web applications is only matched by his dedication to guiding fellow clinicians in embracing the fusion of their skills with technology. We hope you enjoy this episode with Damian Jankowski, and as always, happy listening. Well, Damian, welcome to Beyond These Clinic Walls. We are so excited to have you here. And again, oh my gosh, we were just talking about phrases we fall back on. I think positively elated was what I changed it to last time, but we are pumped to have you on this podcast. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. If I say kind of too many times, please again, let me know.
We'll edit it out. We're fine. I'll just put them all in a remix. That'll be the new transitions. My first question that I kick off with all of our guests is if you can give us a high-level rundown of your career history, high level, from clinic to now, what you currently do, and what it is that you currently do. What's your role?
Yeah, for sure. So I went to the University of Rhode Island for my undergrad, and I went for kinesiology after spending a couple of, maybe a year, spending time as a clinic aide in a PT clinic. Had a little fender bender, got some PT afterwards, and my PT was like super charismatic. And I just loved being there, loved being around it. I think I am kind of bit of a science head. I enjoyed that as well. And so ended up working there for a bit while I was going to school. And I think I was in school when I decided to do kinesiology. I kind of did a switch from engineering actually initially, which is going to come full circle eventually here. I was doing kinesiology, graduated from that. I already had my mind made up to go to PT school, which is kinesis, like the perfect stepping stone, I think, at the time. I basically just did the regular, 4 years, 3-year DPT, and I lived in New Hampshire for a bit doing my doctorate in PT. Ended up working back in Rhode Island again for a little bit. Got my first job down there. I worked for about 7 months before getting an opportunity to work for a university. I worked there as a clinician for about 8 years in orthopedics. Just recently, how long ago? A month? Not even a whole month. Took my first full-time, legit kind of software development gig. I've done a few startups prior to that while I was doing clinical work. Yeah, and so now I'm basically doing full-time software development for the same university, actually. So there was an opportunity and applied for it. Got in.
That's very cool. Yeah, and there's an MBA somewhere in there too, right?
Yes. So I did part-time, my MBA part-time while I was a clinician for the university. We got a big benefit being at the university as employees, and I kind of wanted to do it anyways, so it was a perfect opportunity, yeah.
What was some of your motivation for going for an MBA, especially while working in the clinic too? At that point in time, had you been considering thinking more of the business side of healthcare and just wanting to have those skills? What was your motivation?
I think I wanted to do management at the time. And like while I was trying to finagle my way into a management position, I went to do the MBA as well. I knew that even if I didn't go that route, that it would come in handy, I think. And honestly, as silly as it sounds, I love learning. And so I had this opportunity to go to school and learn some more stuff. And it was just a great experience. And I loved being in class again. And I don't know if I would do it again now at this point after doing all that, but I did enjoy it while I did it.
No, I love school too. I think Emily does too. I remember you saying that in like one of the first episodes.
Yes. I never wanted to graduate PT school because I love, it's not that it wasn't stressful and I wasn't perfect at it, but I love school.
I think it's a common thread in a lot of your episodes too, is that like, I think you have, and you're going to probably end up talking to a lot of people that are like self-learners, right?
Yeah.
That just kind of like to learn whatever they're doing or something new, and school's any different.
For you, where was the point where you felt like you were at the end of self-learning and needed more structured institutional school learning?
So are we talking about just like software development or?
Maybe let's rewind it to you're in the clinic, you're working as a clinician. And at that point, you're thinking of maybe going into some management. So bringing on the business courses. Had you done anything on your own independently ahead of that?
No, it lent really well to stuff I wanted to do anyways. I always felt kind of entrepreneurial. So all of that stuff lent to me developing ideas for other things I wanted to do anyways. I mean, there are skills you take from it to help in management, but there's, whether it's marketing or other classes that really seem to help with discovering your product market fit or talking to your customers and how to really figure out, what they want and what they need and how they use things, and then how to take that and put it back into your product so that you can keep iterating. And there's a lot of stuff that it really lent well to with everything I think I'm going to do for the rest of my life, honestly, whether it's dealing with people or dealing with products.
I think with the transitioning and PTs going into different roles, we're focused on what PTs can bring to different fields, which is legit and valid to think about, of course. Wondering if your MBA actually helped you back in patient care at all. I mean, speaking of like dealing with people and thinking about like more of like the whole system and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Let me think. I don't know. Like, it's hard to say that, yes, this one thing helped. Like, I'm sure it did in some ways. There were some situations where, not some, like a couple of situations where I was able to be, leading a project. Like, I couldn't pinpoint things that directly helped. But I would say overall, yes, just having that mindset of like, how things come together, how problem solving, additional, work to solve problems and things like that for sure help. Absolutely. With managing patients and managing colleagues, discussing things and whether we were, working on projects together, how to interact well and how to be a good team member rather than, trying to overtake or do too little, too much, that good balance. I think a lot of that came in handy there.
Clinical work, had the opportunity then to take these managerial courses, got your MBA. Connect the gaps for me there from end of clinical work to being like, I want to go maybe in a different direction. This is the route I'm starting to go into. A side project of your own 1AGP. Where are those in the timeline?
Honestly, it's all kind of a blur. They all overlap each other so many places. Sure. But I know that one thing that happened when I was a clinician was that I found myself not able to just being like a natural builder. I've always wanted to like make things either with my hands or with software. I didn't feel like I had that outlet in clinical work. I mean, you could always create new tools for rehab, I suppose, which is great. It's not what seemed to speak to me. I couldn't find that outlet. And so I think that's when I finally said, you know what, I have this idea I need to figure out how to make it. And actually this previous project that I got into when I first started, that feeling of like not having that outlet is what got me started and really needing to like, I need to be able to make these things. And I just don't have that in my clinical work.
I felt that way too. I feel like I've always been like very creative, tying into kind of that entrepreneurial motivation as well. Like you enjoy seeing those opportunities and wanting to make a change and actually have something tangible to present. I feel like I wasn't able to do that in the clinic. There was like a bunch of like, you could be creative with a new exercise, changing up, but how many times can you change up like a TKR protocol afterwards? There's really, you're kind of within certain boundaries. But yeah, that building and that creative muscle to be able to flex that was something, I don't know initially for me if that was as obvious, but in retrospect, I was like, yeah, now that I've been able to satisfy that creative muscle, I definitely realized it was missing in the first place.
Yeah, I think that's what a lot of people are finding. That plus, I mean, there are other aspects like burnout and there are, salary. I think there's a lot of things that are causing people, I think, to leave clinics, but I think that's one of them for a certain person.
What we're hearing with a lot of our guests, and I think the commonalities between Emma, Emily, and I's journeys through it is taking on projects in different spots to build skills that aren't necessarily just those clinical ones, to have outcomes that you're able to share. What were some of the side projects that you worked on?
Yeah, so I worked on a bunch of smaller projects early on just to get, you got to learn, you got to start somewhere and learn from something. So, made some games early on, made some websites, just little things, but they all just kept building and building. And I developed my toolkit of knowledge and abilities just over the years, and eventually started another project that had to do with gaming. I'm a big nerd. I'm very proud of that, and I'm a big tabletop gamer as well. I don't know if you guys are.
I don't know,
but
tabletop, not video games. I don't even know what tabletop
ping pong?
Yeah, sure. No, it's they're board games is one of them, or those pen and paper games, D&D is the most popular. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Dungeons and Dragons.
Mm-hmm.
I've never dipped in because I think I wouldn't come back. I think I would.
You get
stay in.
I'd be in Stranger Things spinoff. I'd be in there in Dungeons and Dragons.
Next season starring Julia.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. Back to you. I forget what we're.
I have no idea what we were talking about. Now I'm just thinking about games, so this is perfect.
It's a home exercise program that you started building.
Yes. So I do have a platform online of my own, 1HEP.com. It's basically a home exercise platform for clinicians. Initially, it was just a reason for me to learn some new technologies online and practice with some new tools. It spiraled into some grotesque monster that I had to, my Frankenstein that I had to eventually continue with because I just fell in love with it and just kept iterating, practicing with the tools, and it turned into something I didn't even expect. So I'm pretty proud of it, and it was a really great foray into what I was doing at the time. And actually, that project was probably, I think, what got me a lot of interviews.
Not to digress again, but were you doing this the whole time you're practicing in those 8 years?
Sure. A lot of late nights. Less so now, but for the last, I'd say 10, 15 years, I really was in that state of burning the candle at both ends, doing a lot all the time. That project related to the games was a website, to basically a marketplace to help connect players and the people that run those games.
Oh, very cool.
So that they could hire those people. When I was creating that was the real, my first major web app that I got really serious with. And I was creating that while I was doing my MBA, while working full time in the clinic. So trying to create a business, go to school, work full time, not die.
Yeah, breathe.
Yeah.
How'd you do that?
I don't know. It just you just do sometimes. Sometimes you just do things and time goes by and you look back and you're like, how was that even a thing? So I was developing my skills. That was probably one of the first major apps that got me into my first coding job, which was a startup gig. It was a new startup that was in the same gaming space. Worked with them for a little while, but having that behind me to show some of my abilities and my interest in the product and the market helped get me to land that job to work with them.
And that was a full-time job?
No, it was part-time. I was doing, at that point, I did. Okay. Yeah, it was, like I said, doing too much at once. Working in the clinic, working part-time for this company. It is just a whole thing. Yeah.
I don't know.
I've learned to slow down these days.
That's impressive.
That's amazing.
And it's also using different parts of your brain. I remember some days at the clinic, there was a time where I was taking 2 classes. I had a student and I was treating full time, but then beyond full time hours. And I wanted just to come home and stare at a wall. So I couldn't imagine then having to flex a different part of your brain too at the end of the day. It's a lot. You're running on fumes.
I don't know. I think it was helpful because it kind of switched my context a little bit and got me totally out of that world for a bit. I was excited to go back to the clinic and I was excited to go out of the clinic at the same time because I knew there were different things on either side that got to pull me out of that zone for a little bit.
Okay, so then as we're now inching more away from the clinic, so we're still half and half. What was your next job after that initial coding one?
Yeah, after I worked with them, I think I was completely addicted. I just wanted to, I knew that that's what I wanted to do. I got so interested and excited at the idea of doing that stuff that I figured I want to try to pursue this full time. And then I just took the next step to look for an opportunity. I started applying to a lot of places, more startups, some full-time positions, tried to find some part-time. So it was a big mix because I wasn't sure how to tackle it. I wasn't sure, am I going to stay part-time,
Yeah.
a little bit of this, a little bit of that? Am I going to try to go full-time?
So how did you navigate that? What was the end decision that you did make?
I realized that finding part-time work in software development is really hard. I think I got really lucky because if you're going to go for a startup, you're unlikely going to get anything part-time because they're kind of like hitting the floor running. Everyone's on deck.
Right.
They want everyone at every meeting every day so that they all know what they're doing. So that's going to be hard. If you're interested in doing something in a startup, you probably want to jump right in, which is not easy because like I did pursue some applications to startups or some interviews at startups, but they don't offer health insurance many times. If they're a little bit larger, maybe they do, but smaller ones most likely won't. So if you have a family, that's definitely a harder decision to make. So there's a lot of things to weigh, I think, if you're going to look into that first job, especially, and especially if you're more green, maybe you want to look for something more established, like an actual full-time job at a company, because then you'll get the opportunity to learn from other people. It's a little slower paced.
Mhm.
You can reach out to other people. You're not expected to like produce right from the get-go.
Right away. Yeah. That was my first product job was at a startup. And now my current role is at a much more established company. And that was something that I was running into because I was coming in very green. And to an extent, I felt like I got my driver's license without going through driver's ed. And I think what would have been helpful would have been going through driver's ed a little bit, getting some of those established foundations. But at the same time, to the flip of that, you get this experience where you do just have to dive right in and you get to work with a bunch of different teams, pick up a bunch of different skills. And it's kind of just like throwing spaghetti at the wall and hoping to see what sticks at times. But you do pull a lot of fun things out of there as well. You get to wear a lot of hats.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm wondering, engineers, software developers, full stack, there's a lot of buzz terms. That's a little bit of a black box, and I feel like a lot of them overlap. Can you break it down maybe with some definition? So you are currently a full stack web developer, correct?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
And what is that?
Yes. So there's basically I don't want to make it sound like it's so simple. There's
Right.
more to it, but basically if people have heard of front end development, which is like working on what's closer to the user, like the actual site, how users interact with it, the actual layouts, the actions and things that change on the page, things that you see. That's where a lot of front end development comes from, or what's involved with front end development. And then you have back end development, which is a lot more with data, interacting with the database, doing a lot of things that are like behind the scenes. And so full stack is just essentially doing both. You do the back end, you do the front end, and you know how to connect the two, and you don't need to kind of wait for the other person to help plug in from that side. You can kind of handle both sides of it.
Is there a benefit? Is there a reason why you wanted to go full stack rather than either front end or back end?
So for me personally, I don't think it was something I chose. I think it's something I had to do because if I wanted to create these products, then I had to know how to do both. I had no option. If you know that you want to move into development, if you want to do it for a legit company where you're finding a role where it's not a startup, right? Any non-startup where you can be part of like a bigger team and a bigger organization. If you want to specialize in front end or back end, that's a little bit more, I think, appropriate because you're going to get very, very good at a set of skills. And and there's plenty of stuff to do in both, right? There's plenty of stuff here, plenty of stuff there. And then the DevOps is a whole other thing where you're managing servers and whatever. But you get very, very skilled in a subset of skills. And that's just as lucrative, I think. It's just as needed by companies and it's just as good of a route to take, especially if you don't like one or the other, right? If you don't like to do database work, if you don't like to deal with a lot of the data on the back end, and you love touching, everything that the user is going to touch, like you love design, you love user interfaces, user experiences, then front end is like your bag, right? But if you hate that, right? If you hate, I don't even want to look at text or animations, whatever, CSS, I don't want to deal with any of that stuff, how it all looks and how it feels to the user, then maybe back end is your thing, right? But if you don't care and you like both and you like the whole chain, the whole supply chain of stuff in between, then maybe you want to do both. Maybe you want to be a full stack developer.
Is there one that's like a recommended starting place and then you go to the other, or are they both kind of just equals and just different?
As far as a starting point goes, I would say it depends what you like. I think if you like one or the other, you should go directly to that route. I don't think either is a prerequisite to the other. It's like,
Gotcha.
I don't know if this is a good analogy, like a plug in a socket. Like you can be either one, or you can be. You can't be both, right? I don't know. Maybe that's a horrible analogy, but the idea is that you can do both. But if you don't like one of them, just don't do it. You don't have to.
But it's not like front end is more junior and back end is more senior or something like that.
For
They're
sure
just,
not.
okay,
Mm-mm.
got
No,
it.
there's people whose whole careers are based on front end or whole careers are based on back end. My current job is actually a stack of technology stack meaning like just all of the resources you use, all the tools you use is like your stack. I was not familiar with a lot of the stuff that I'm doing now, but I'm very confident that, or at least I felt confident that I could learn those things. And it was something I wanted to grow into. So it was perfect for me. It was kind of like an intermediate, middle level developer position. I definitely don't consider myself senior. I think there are people that are 15 years out that don't consider themselves senior. But I know that I can do some good work. I can find my way around documentation and things to learn those things. But it was not something I was familiar with. But you still should feel like, do you think you could learn new things pretty independently? Of course, depending on the level of the job, level of expertise you would need coming in.
Yeah.
But if you feel pretty confident, and I would say like if you're interested in front end development, especially like JavaScript stuff, there's a podcast. It's called syntax.fm, I think, and it's two guys, Wes Boss and I don't want to forget Scott Talinsky. I think really great developers, super amusing, entertaining, and they teach you so well.
Oh, cool.
But they have themselves worked in like 15 years and consider themselves still learning. And
I'm going to add that to my playlist.
if you're interested in anything front end, that's your place to go, I think.
When you say like learning new things and like your stack and stuff, is this something where you would say, oh, that's a new language, I got to go scramble at home and spend some hours at home learning it? Or is it something that you can really learn on the job?
For sure. So I think if you're going to be really good at something, you've got to want to do it for the love of doing it. Like you'll probably want to put the time in to get really good at it, even outside work hours, right? Like you don't have to. I mean, some people want to go to work and go home and not work, right? Especially if you get pretty good down the line and you feel confident being able to do those things at work. Like at my job now, I have plenty of time to learn what I need to learn. Do I spend time outside of work doing it? Of course I do, because I'm crazy. But I just love doing it, and I'll like leave work and I'll be like, at night I might want to just figure one thing out I couldn't figure out earlier and jump on for an hour or two and just mess around with it, and I can't get enough of it. So yeah, maybe that's not the right thing to do, but I think people who just like to learn and love coding for the sake of coding will find themselves doing something really similar.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good reference point to know that you're in the right spot, is that if you finish work, you're 9 to 5 and you're still either thinking about it but excited about it and wanting to get into your flow state, as Stephen put, I think that's a really good indication of it. You talk about being a good learner and being able to find an answer even if you're not supposed to. What are some other traits that would make for a good full stack web developer?
So number one would definitely just be, do you like to learn? Like, I don't remember where I heard this. Oh, it was on that Syntax podcast, actually. They were talking about someone that they had met that was like later in life, but had just picked up coding. And one of their hobbies was that they were like also building kitchen cabinets, because one day they wanted to build kitchen cabinets and they realized the price was ridiculous. So instead they bought the tools and built it themselves over the course of a couple of years. Like that's exactly the kind of person that would be good in any kind of engineering role, I think.
Yeah.
Right. You just want to learn how it works and how it happens and do it yourself. And
like having a curiosity and asking like why.
That's perfect. Having the curiosity to want to know more about things. Mm-hmm.
Can you go over what a day in your role looks like?
Yeah, this is might be one of my favorite parts of the podcast right here.
Oh, good.
And I say that because so going from being a clinician, you're on a set schedule, right? You have patients every whatever hour, 45 minutes.
10 minutes.
10 minutes. I don't know, 6 minutes. Yeah, whatever it is. It's crazy, right? And then you hope that at some time in the day, maybe you're planning hours ahead of when you can go to the bathroom, when you can get a snack, if you're going to get a lunch, etc. Right? And in this current role, like when I first started that first week, I was like, I didn't know how to handle it. I had no schedule. My boss asked me, when are you going to come in on your first day?
Yeah.
And I was like, when am I supposed to come in? Like that didn't make any sense to me.
That does not equate in my brain.
Yeah.
And so I got there and like the whole week, like there's going to be not a give and take, but more like there's going to be trade-offs here, right? You have a lot more freedom because you don't have a schedule. So you have all day to do whatever it is you're doing. Like you have like maybe a huddle in the morning, a stand-up where you get together, you talk with your team about what's going to happen, what happened the day before, what you're going to do that day. But then the rest of the day, you're doing whatever you said you're going to do. So you have to be productive. But at the same time, if you need to go to the bathroom, you need to get a snack, these sound so like such little ridiculous things, right? You should always have time for those things. But as a clinician, as we all know, you really don't. Or it's very hard you have to manage your time very well to fit those kind of things in. And so the freedom is
going
great.
From high school to college, I feel like making that transition from high school to college, that's how I felt.
That's a great way to compare. So you have this freedom, but you have to be careful and you have to know that you are now responsible of managing yourself and you have to get things done when they need to be done. So you still have these expectations, but you are now in control of all of it, right? No one's telling you what your schedule is anymore, which is great. I mean, there's times when people, do a half day in the office, half day at home, a lot of people working from home. If you need to take some hours to do something, and this might not be on every team either. Like I just know that my team that I'm working with now is incredible. I'm like over the moon with this team. I'm really happy that I landed in this position because they're great individually, but also just the team environment, camaraderie, everything is just, it is awesome. It's just really great. And there's things that they do, going for a walk because they've been staring at a screen for 3 hours. So they're going to go for a walk for 20 minutes, just at some point, we just say, do you want to go out, take a walk and come back? Which are things that as health experts, as health conscious clinicians, I was almost never doing. Like we did some walks once in a while, colleagues and I, but it was very scattered, very intermittent.
Like once a month or something, not every day.
Right. Monthly exercise.
Yeah.
It's the need.
Yeah, we're really living by our own statements. All the education we give to our patients.
What did you do to get to self-manage? Were there any skills that you picked up that were really helpful in that process? Because I remember I kind of went through a week of being like, oh my gosh, like, okay, let's tie it back in. And I do really well with checklists. I have like a whole prioritization strategy now. Initially, like with my meetings, I remember wouldn't document at the end of a meeting, or like if I was scheduling ahead of time and creating an itinerary for a meeting we were going over with people, I wouldn't write it down or write it after because I was just like, oh, I'll remember. And then I was like, this is what I've been trained as a clinician to do. Like I live by my documentation and here I am not applying it. Like this is bananas. Like, come on, Julia, get with the program. Is there any skills that you picked up really honed in that helped you with that self-management transition?
I probably need to take some of your ideas because I don't think I have a lot of good strategies. The one thing that I've done in the last few years, just personally, I don't know, maybe it'll help with my job, maybe not, is using a calendar. I always forgot dates. I always forgot when appointments were until I started using a calendar. And anytime something is going to happen, I have to be somewhere, I have an appointment, whatever, I throw it on the calendar. I never forget anything anymore. It's like my best friend. So if you're not good at remembering things, calendar is number one for sure.
Yeah. I always say if it's not on my work calendar, I'm going to miss it. And I did when I first started working from home, I would miss, and it's not like me to miss appointments, but if it's not on there, I miss it. And I set reminders for every single meeting on my calendar now, like little alarms that go off.
Mm-hmm. It's so easy to get wrapped up in something, and even if it's you're 10 minutes away from a meeting, 5 minutes away, and you're like, oh, it's 5 minutes into the meeting, I kind of wrapped up into this. It's so easy because you're just sitting at your computer screen and you don't have a patient asking you what their next exercise is. You have your little Slack notification going off, and you're like, oh, I silenced that because I was in my focus zone, and the whole thing. The other thing that's been really helpful for me is blocking time on my schedule for focus time, which is variable, but if I have to put no meetings on there, and that's just my time where I zone in, and I have a list, all my checklists. I love my checklist, and I'm like, these are the things that I'm just going to cross off in my focus time, and that's what I hone in on. That's my little other fun strategy that I like. If that helps.
And there's a lot of times when people just kind of message you like, hey, can I ask you about X, Y, or Z? And sometimes you're like, it's already happened 5 times, and you need to say just close yourself off from that. So I think that's a really good strategy if you're constantly getting messaged to discuss something or
I also live and die by my Google tasks.
I still have my pen and paper tasks. I don't know why I use both, but all I do is create tasks for every day. And if I have a task for another day, obviously I schedule it, but I move all my tasks over every single day. So there's nothing that's like getting undone.
Is it like a shopping list type of thing?
Oh, Google Tasks. Oh my gosh.
Oh.
Oh boy, what did I just...
Like, I love my task list, and it feels so good to mark them complete. It's like a drug.
Yeah.
They're just these little bars at the top of your schedule, and you can click on them and mark them complete, and you can move them to a different day if you want to do it a different day, and you can make emails into tasks, so you can remind yourself to go back to an email to get something done.
That sounds glorious. I love it. We talk about interviews and portfolio building, how those were different from PT to clinic. Walk us through interview process, even maybe like job searching process. Very different than when interviewing for a clinical role.
For sure. Yeah. So if you are not sure if you're ready to interview, go interview. The best thing you can do is just get comfortable and like get rid of those jitters of you're not going to know what to expect. With developer positions especially, a lot of times, especially with startups, but a lot of times in general, you're going to run into a position where they're gonna want you to do a coding interview, which is, demonstrating your skills, whether it's in person or they give you a homework assignment. Usually it's nothing too crazy. It takes a few hours. Or in my case, on one of them, I think it took me 8 hours because I had no idea what I was doing. But that's the whole point, right? Is that you realize, okay, like this is what an example question kind of is, right? And so I need to get used to, these are the things I'm going to be expected to do for these roles. So the more of those you do, the more experienced you get more comfortable doing them. Eventually, it just becomes like, okay, just got to do another one of these. No big deal. You get more comfortable talking about things that you know, the things that you don't know, answering the questions. You kind of start to see patterns in some of the questions. So you get ready for those things that you don't know. You go afterwards, you look them up, for next time, right? So there's a lot of benefit to just actually going through and doing it. And in terms of portfolio, I didn't have a portfolio, but I would absolutely recommend having one. I don't know if it's going to be the thing that sells you getting a job, but I know that, especially if it's going to be front end, because you want to demonstrate some of your capabilities with developing pages, right, and how they look and how they function. So having a portfolio of actual work really helps to. It doesn't have to be like things that are established and brought to market. They can just be like little examples that you did because you wanted to test a new animation. So you did this page and did this whole thing, and it's an example of what you can do. But having that to show definitely demonstrates, before you're even meeting anyone for that first interview, it demonstrates some of the skills that you have and what you've already been able to accomplish. That's why I said that I think that this one HEP project that I have was what got me not only some interviews, but also some potentially maybe even the position I have now. But definitely, I mean, I remember one guy from a startup was like, he saw my site and he was like, this is great. Like, I want to have an interview. Let's meet next week and we'll talk.
So for your resume, what do you label yourself as? How is it set up? Do you have like an intro that you say, Damian, full stack web developer, and then kind of go into your story there? And then second page, clinician, clinical experience. Is that what you've done?
Pretty much. Yeah. I had a recruiter told me some good advice, was that kind of obvious, but I didn't, maybe didn't register for me at the time. Really cater your resume to the job you want, right? And I thought I was doing that, but it turns out that I was catering to both. I was trying to play on both sides of the line. And so once I really catered to that development resume, that development part, and I made it, look more like I was that developer, which clearly what happened, it did definitely get me in the door more often than I had kind of both. And my intro was talking about both, and you really want it for the job that you have, and absolutely create that cover letter, customize it for the job that you're trying to get, talk about the job in your cover letter, tell them how excited you are. They want to hear about you. They want to hear why you love what you do, why you want to work for them. That cover letter matters for sure. So don't ignore those. Even if you have to do 100 interviews or 100 applications, cater, change little things here and there. Just make sure you have that cover letter because it makes you stand out.
Looping back quickly to the interviewing, for me, I get like very anxious for interviews. And the best advice I also got was just to do a bunch of them, to apply to everything. And then you get comfortable using the terminology, you get comfortable talking to people, you get comfortable saying your story and that storytelling and like why you are where you are. And each time you get to refine it and make it sound that much better, so that when you're do apply for your job that you're like, this is the one I really want, you're so much more prepared. Yeah, that was also great advice I got. A lot of interviews these days are remote. And so one little trick I did is I put sticky notes around my monitor, and it just has like the first like buzzwords of, I know, like strengths and weaknesses. That's like a common one. Or like, tell us about a time when, and then you use your STAR method. I would just do like little, like 3 words that I knew could kick off the story that I was going to tell or the example I was going to give. But it was that like little hurdle that for me, I would freeze up and not be able to talk through it, that if I just did the little sticky notes around it. So if you are someone who gets nervous during interviews, strongly recommend the sticky note method, but practice it before so they're not falling off while you're interviewing. Which didn't happen to me, but it was also a nightmare. But if you think you could just go in and talk and just like pull it off in an interview, you can't. You're wrong. Practice. That was me. I crashed and burned, but practice your interviews. It's going to help a lot.
I love that too, because I think a lot of us, myself included, would get an interview and think, I got to crush this interview. It has to be perfect. When no, it's just a practice. You're just practicing.
And I mean, obviously, don't tell the employer that this is a practice round. Treat it like the real thing. But that was some great advice that I gave. Oh, how about technical language most worth your time to develop? Well, still in the clinic. So maybe thinking of people in that kind of transition period.
Maybe it depends on what it is you want to do. Like when we talked about front end, back end, all that kind of stuff. Maybe it depends. But nowadays, honestly, JavaScript has a home on both sides, in back end and front end, where you can do a full stack of only JavaScript, which used to not be the case, where it was very much JavaScript on the front end and something else on the back end. But now, since you can do it on both, and there's some really great tools out there that let you harness that, I would have to say JavaScript. And if I told myself one thing back then to learn, like something different to do, I would say I should have learned JavaScript a lot earlier, because I only started learning it probably maybe a year and a half ago, versus in my 4 or 5 years of coding altogether. Start off with Python, which is a great language to start with, because I don't want to say it's easy. It's very readable. It's almost like just reading just standard language rather than coding language. So it's easy to get into. But I would say JavaScript for sure. I'm probably going to make some people upset by saying that, but I think JavaScript is the king. In development, there's a lot of like the right tool for the right job, rather than just like, I'm just JavaScript and that's it. It's like, no, well, there's better languages maybe for certain tasks, like maybe data, machine learning, data analytics. You might want to do Python or something else. So like it all depends on what you want to accomplish. And I think that's an honest conversation you have to have with yourself. Sometimes when you're doing things is like, I don't want to just do one thing all the time because I know it. I want to get better at picking the right tool for the right job. So actually getting really confident and comfortable with knowing how to pick between libraries, meaning like the libraries are basically just like code repositories that you can pull into your own project so that you don't have to do all the work yourself. Someone already did a really good job, and so you might use their library. So knowing how to pick one over the other because it's better for the job you have at hand, and it has certain downsides and upsides, and knowing how to pick between the two, getting really good at that is, I think, what starts to accelerate how you can categorize yourself as like a junior or an intermediate or senior. I think being able to debug really well and then knowing how to pick between, what's the best tool for the job. I'll tell you one thing. If you want to just be a developer, if you don't have all this time and money to invest in it, there's nothing stopping you from pulling up YouTube, nothing stopping you from jumping on some free stuff to start with, JavaScript, Python, whatever you like to work in. Pull it up, start coding, build something else, realize how horrible your last project was, build it better the next time. And then just keep doing that and do it. And if you have time, if you're not rushing anywhere, if you're not, if you're not ripping your hair out trying to get out of clinical work, like if you still enjoy it and it's something but you just realize there's something else that you want that you're not getting there. If you have that time, then start learning and just see where it takes you and put in the amount of time you want and just stay diligent, because that initial foray into it is the hardest part, right? It's like you're looking at it, it's like learning another language to speak, right?
Yeah.
It's really hard at the beginning, but if you persevere and you have that determination to get through it and push through those moments where it gets hard, then you fix a problem that you're dealing with and you're like, oh, it's like playing golf.
Yeah.
Oh my God,
Yeah.
it's just like playing golf. I just realized you hit so many bad shots, right? You mess up so many times and then you hit that one shot that's what keeps you coming back to play, right? Because that one shot was like, oh, that was what it's all about, right? So you fix that one problem and then you're like, it all works. And then, but that's constantly happening.
Yeah.
And if you have to learn to love that.
Right.
It's like a love-hate relationship. But if you have that, then you're going to do just fine on your own, for sure. If you need some hand-holding, maybe that's the point where you need a boot camp or a degree.
Yeah. There's a really good free course. Sorry, Emily. It's CS50, the Harvard class. Have you taken that or heard of it?
I have no idea what that is.
It's through Harvard. It's CS50. It's a free class. It's a computer science. It's like intro to computer science. And it's great. It's a free resource. If you want at the end, I think you can pay like $25. Don't quote me on that. I don't know how much it is, but then you can get certified in it to actually walk away with the CS50 certification. But it's a great introduction, computer science, and then a little bit more higher level things. And you walk away with like problem solving, like you actually have assignments through it too. I'm making my way through it right now, but
sounds great.
It's a great resource, and it's, I think, a great thing for people who might be a little interested to start dipping their toes in the computer science realm.
One thing I just wanted to add was that to help you in that initial stage, also find something you're super passionate about. If you find yourself having difficulty at the beginning, find something you're super passionate about. So like I said, I'm a huge nerd gamer. So my first project was just building my own game. So there used to be like these text games. They're still around, but really popular back in the day when like AOL was a thing, where it's like an RPG that you would play on a console, like on Xbox or PlayStation, but it's all text. So you talk to people, it's live, it's multiplayer. But I always wanted to be part of like help craft that world. And I was like, I just always wanted to create one. And so that was my first project. And so I loved the idea of seeing how it came out. And I was like, oh my God, I'm actually making this. Gamifying the concept of gamification, gamifying my programming at the beginning was the best way to get into it, because I didn't even think of it as learning. So this is a repository. It's basically just so it's on GitHub. It's a home for code. Really, that's it. That's what a repository is. And so a lot of times what will happen is like so those libraries we mentioned earlier will be kept in a place like this so that it serves multiple purposes. Like, I mean, you have a home for it, so you can pull that code down to your computer and work on it in multiple places, or you can iterate on it. And this has the ability to track changes and things like that. So there's like a whole developer part to it. But this is a page on GitHub. It just happens to be housed here that has all these different roadmaps for what you might be interested in pursuing. So like if you are interested in front-end development or back-end development or DevOps, there's more here, but maybe that's a good place to start. Those are the first three on the list. You click one of those and it basically opens up this flow chart of like, I'll open the front end one so I can maybe speak to it specifically. So like if you're interested and you know that you like the front end stuff and you don't want to deal with anything else, you can open this up and you can be like, okay, like what's a good starting point for me to look at if I want to get into front end development? And it talks about like, as simple as it gets, internet. How does the internet work? What is HTTP? Browsers, how do they work?
I love that.
Next step would be like some of the tools, HTML, CSS, JavaScript. Those are like your main building blocks of any web page. So that would be your next step. And then what comes with that? Maybe some accessibility things, maybe learning the basics, how do forms work and validating forms, the things that go along with those specific front-end tools. Then once you get a little more comfortable with that, just keep looking down the list of where things go. You might be starting to look at some front-end frameworks, which are basically like for example, React is a front-end framework, which is a framework from within which you work to make really complex applications. It just does a lot of stuff for you already, and you can build with it. It's almost like having Legos, right? You can build what you want, but you have Legos already created. You don't have to go mold your own Legos or carve your own like Legos. And so you could just keep looking down the list. There are things on this list that by the time I found this, I was probably halfway through it already, but I was like, oh, but up this list, like I never even looked into that thing, right? And then I just helped to fill in the blanks of my knowledge by just following this flow chart and seeing if there was anything important that I thought I should learn. And you have that for a bunch of things. You have it for front end, back end, DevOps. DevOps is just like server management. And then I think I haven't looked at these other ones, but like there's one for React. So if you like front end and now you know you want to work in React, which is just one specific framework in JavaScript, now you can look at all the specific things that you should learn for that framework. So there's a whole bunch on here, and I think they're just really useful for someone who's not really sure where to start or has already started and is not really sure what to look at next.
The last thing to wrap it up with, I'll pretend to be Emma Brady right now. I love sales. Here, channel Emma. Emma always adds, you've done a lot for us for being on this podcast and for answering questions. There are a lot of great resources for anyone moving into this field, into this area, if they're curious. Is there anything that we can do for you?
You know what? Just keep spreading the word. Keep telling people about how, it's being a clinician is amazing, right? I mean, I loved being a clinician and I still love it. I really enjoy it. Who knows if I'll go back to doing it again. But if you feel like something's missing, if you feel like if you're a builder, a learner, I mean, we're all learners as clinicians, but if you feel like you just can't get that itch scratched with building things and you think software might be the way to go, then it's an option. It's a possibility, and who knows where it'll lead you. It's led me to a lot of places, to a place where I actually, it's crazy how excited I am on a Monday to go back to work now that I wasn't before.
So great.
Right.
But, after 8 years, it changes,
happy.
right? You feel different.
Yeah.
And who knows how I'll feel in 2-3 years doing this, but
right.
time goes by and I don't even realize because I just love what I'm doing so much. Yeah, social media is tough nowadays. I think I've gotten away from it a lot more than I used to. I am on Twitter. You can find me at FullStackDPT or on LinkedIn is probably the easiest.
FullStackDPT. That sounds like a solid. That's like
that's
the
good.
That
that's a good one.
Your
podcast.
Right, yeah,
I wasn't
been
sure.
on handle. Yeah, that's great. FullStackDPT. Love it.
So yeah, those couple places. I love talking about this stuff and nerding out about games, coding. If you ever have questions and you want to hear more about specifics about my journey or and if I can help in any other way, I'm always looking to help the community and it's an open door. Anyone who wants to reach out is more than welcome.
Well, it's been a pleasure having you on here, Damian. I'm excited for your return episode because I think there's a lot more to uncover. Thank you for being with us
maybe
today.
We'll Dungeon World on that one.
Thanks to everyone for listening to this episode of the Beyond These Clinic Walls podcast. As always, be sure to follow us on LinkedIn and Instagram at Beyond These Clinic Walls for all the latest updates and episode releases. Make sure to join the Clinician Transition group on LinkedIn and Slack to be part of the networking community for like-minded rehab professionals. Questions, comments, concerns, or do you know someone who might make an excellent guest on our next show? Reach out to us at beyondtheseclinicwalls@gmail.com. And as always, thanks so much for listening.